In this video, we're going to jump right into the results of the blind camera test video featuring the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K that was released earlier this week. So let's jump right on in. So the very first clip where Bert is out in the park with the tree in the background and she's holding the chip chart, that was shot on the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. And because it's a very long name, I'm just going to call it the Pocket 6K moving forward if I can help myself. I actually posted a still of this clip, or a very similar clip, on Facebook showing the ungraded and then graded version. And what was really confusing to me were some of these comments from different people saying, oh, it looks blurry. That's bokeh, right? So the only part of the image that shouldn't be blurry is the point of interest. And I'm guessing people were just messing with me because it doesn't make sense that someone would say it's not sharp when the only part that should be sharp is Bert and the chip chart. But I was really impressed because this was at about 11:30 in the morning. So it wasn't quite high noon, like the sun wasn't right above us. And it was partly cloudy, which actually helped diffuse some of the light, but it wasn't completely cloudy. And what I was really blown away by right away when I brought it into post, not while I was in the field, and I'll tell you guys more about that in my first impressions video. But what I was really impressed by was how well it just naturally captures all of the gradients. And, you guys have heard me talk about gradients on my channel quite a bit. And the main thing about gradients for me is that our skin tones, the skin tonality, the skin texture, there are lots and lots of gradients or layers of color in the way that the color moves inside of people's skin, right? And this is doing a really good job at recreating or representing what I can see with my eye when I look at Bert and what I could see with my eye when I was out at this park shooting this scene. The wheat, the tree, even the yellowish portions of the tree, that is what the tree looks like because we're heading into fall. So this tree hasn't quite completely changed, but the process has started. The clouds, the texture in the clouds, even though they're out of focus, that just kind of really blew me away. So I was really, 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 really impressed. So in the second clip, this is actually a different park altogether. And it's a park that we had never been to before. That's actually not quite exactly true because I use this park quite a bit in several of my videos and have for many years because of the huge backgrounds, beautiful landscape. It's just a really nice place to shoot. And there's lots and lots and lots of texture. And what you'll notice right away, obviously the background is what's in focus, and that was on purpose. I shot it with this camera here, the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, right? And look at the clouds. The clouds didn't clip. I was using 6 stops of ND. The other thing that really impressed me is that while I was using 6 stops of ND, I didn't get IR pollution. And that's something that other Blackmagic cameras have been plagued with. And if I'm, I don't want to piss anybody off, but a lot of the footage that I've seen coming out of these cameras from people who received them the day after they were announced and so on and so forth, not everyone, but lots of it has had IR pollution in some form or greens turn brown. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. And that was actually a concern of mine because IR pollution is actually a pain in the ass to clean or clean up or try to clean up in post-production. And what I'm seeing here is that the trees are green. The trees look exactly like they did to my eyes. I don't see, even on the tree trunks, which the tree trunks are like this grayish green type. It's these trees, a lot of these trees are lindenwood trees. This happens to be Lindenwood Park. So if you guys want to Google what that tree actually looks like, you can see then stills and then compare it against this clip, and you're going to notice very quickly that this is a very accurate representation of what this tree or these types of trees look like. And again, the color is just spot on. Even in the foreground where Bert is standing on the bridge, right, with her arm up, we can see her skin tones look very natural. So across the entire spectrum, this did its job. Now, I didn't use the Blackmagic provided LUT. I did adjust the contrast myself, and then I also did adjust the saturation myself on all of these clips. Because the extended video LUT that is provided by Blackmagic, I'm not a fan of. It doesn't look good to me. And simply, stretching out the highlights and bringing down the shadows and calling it good is also not, it's okay, but it's to me, it feels a little bit, and again, I don't want to piss anybody off, but it feels a little bit hipster. This looks much more, in my opinion, again, totally subjective, but in my opinion, it looks very cinematic and it looks color accurate. So if I can get an image to look the way that I want, right, with the right type of bokeh to make it cinematic, because this is what I'm directing. That's what cinematic to me means, directing my viewer into where it is that they should be focusing or paying attention. So if I can get it cinematic, and then I can get true, accurate representation of colors, then that means when I decide to apply a stylized color grade, I have a solid foundation to build from. And that's why this, to me, is a big, big deal. So again, very, very cool that it's able to do that. And like I said, I couldn't clip the highlights in the clouds, and I kept all of the detail in the darker sides of the image. So again, very, very impressed with this Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, which I should call the Pocket 6K. So now let's look at the ones where I actually did label them and say which camera was which. So this very first clip, this is Shania. And in this first clip labeled C, that was actually shot on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, the Pocket 6K. I shot this at 135 millimeters. Now I used the following focal lengths just so that you guys know. I used 24, I used 35, I used 50, I used 85, and then I used 135. And the reason why I went with those focal lengths is because you can buy, acquire, rent. Some people might already own every single one of those focal lengths in cinema glass as well as in stills glass, right? Because they're very common. And as I said, if they're accessible to most people, I felt like this would help. This was shot at 135 millimeters, approximately 8 feet away from Shania. And this is the look that I'm getting out of the Pocket 6K with the Super 35 sensor. That's pretty awesome. The texture in her skin looks good. The tonality is good. The color representation is very accurate. If you look at the detail in her eyes, that's again very good and an accurate representation of what you see when you're actually standing right in front of Shania. So that was, again, the Pocket 6K. The second clip, which I labeled A, so again, all the C's are then the Pocket 6K. All the A's are the RED 8K Helium. And you're going to see that we have a much wider field of view with the 8K camera. And the reason for it is that the sensor is larger. So if the sensor is larger, it gives us a much bigger or wider field of view. To me, this is a very pleasing image. Each camera has its place in production, I believe, but I would not hesitate for a minute, just jumping back here to, the clip where I shot it with the 6K. I wouldn't hesitate shooting with the 6K on a project if it's going to look this good. And can I get the two cameras to match? I can if I spend a little bit of time in post creating a LUT for the 6K camera so that I can then very quickly match it to my other cameras. Camera B, or the camera labeled B, is actually the Canon C200. The Canon C200 does a very nice job of, again, capturing detail. The dual pixel autofocus at 135 millimeters very clearly nailed exactly where it is that we wanted to focus. But pay attention to this though. So all the cameras use the exact same lenses across this entire test, right? But look at how much detail is missing out of Shania's iris. Look at her eyes. There is less information, as in it seems like the image overall is softer. Now, is this a soft image? The answer is no. This is a 4K image versus a 6K image. That's why the other one appears to be sharper, but then more importantly, that's why shooting in 6K and then downscaling to 4K is so powerful. Because if I want to invoke emotion, I can more effectively get that done with a shot that looks like this, which was shot on a Pocket 6K, versus this, which was shot on the Canon C200. They're both good shots, they both serve a purpose, but story is what should drive the intent, and then also the tool choice that you use when you're putting your project together. This third shot, which is again Bert on the bridge, where I'm panning from the river up to her on the bridge, and then in the background we can see the actual clouds. That was again camera C, which is the Pocket 6K. And again, very quickly, look at the detail on the bridge itself, the little dings and scratches and stuff from weather and time and age, or the patina, as some people would call it. There's a lot of detail there. If you look at the shadow side of the beams that hold the structure in place, there is both texture, detail, and tonality in there. This is really, really impressive. And when you want to talk about dynamic range, again, if you're looking at the shadow side of those beams, where we can still see character on the dark side of these different beams in this iron bridge, and then you look off into the background and you see detail in clouds, that's a really great example of the capabilities of the dynamic range that the Pocket 6K has to offer. Even more impressive than that, to me, is how if we look like towards where Bert is and then into the trees that are behind her directly, there are branches, right, and leaves, but then on the backside of that there is sky, and we can see color and no chromatic aberration, or at least no fringing, color fringing that can happen from the way that greens are read by CMOS sensors. So again, very impressed. Pocket 6K. Now let's move on to another close-up at 135 millimeters of Shania. And this is the camera that was labeled D, and this is actually the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K. So this is the first version of the Pocket Cinema camera, and we can see, again, the camera does a really good job. But I think what impressed me the most, this appears to be much more in line, at least the image to me, to my eye, on my system, appears to be a much closer match to the Canon C200. And of course that makes sense because they are both 4K sensors. But look at her skin tones and her skin tonality and detail. And then I'm going to jump back to that original clip. It's almost an exact match. And I say almost an exact match because, as I mentioned, I didn't use a LUT, and I literally just looked at each clip as I was going through in Resolve, and I adjusted the contrast and the saturation to come up with this very specific look. If I had matched the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows, it would be an exact match. So that was me. But again, what impresses me about this is that I can very quickly take a Pocket 6K, a Pocket 4K, or two 6Ks and one 4K, and turn it into a multicam project that allows me to be very efficient in post-production. And we'll talk more about that again in my first impressions video. The one where Shania is outside of our building here and she's walking and she went from shadow to sun and it's slow motion, that was also shot on the Pocket 6K. What I had to do, because she was in shadow, first off, I had to use quite a bit of ND. And then two, I then had to split the difference between exposure in the shadow so that I wouldn't completely destroy her skin tone, and then what it is that her skin tone would then look like and hair would look like when she hit the sun. So if this was a planned shot, instead of me just saying, hey Shania, we're going to go outside and we're going to take this shot, I would have actually done two takes instead of just one take. I would have done one while she's in shadow, and then I'd have done a second take while she's actually in the sun to correctly expose for this. Now this again was shot at 120 frames per second in that 2.7K mode that the camera offers. And then it was scaled up to 4K, and that's what you're looking at. So any imperfections that you will or may have noticed, which I'm sure you did, because I know I did, is from the fact that I took a 2.7K image and then upscaled it to 4K. So that was, if I was delivering to 1080, we would see a much better looking image. So in this next clip, this was shot on the RED Helium. And the RED Helium, as you guys know, I am a fan of the image quality on that camera, and there's really not much more to say. This is a very good looking shot at 50 millimeters of Shania. And let's move on to the next clip. This was shot with camera C, which is the Pocket 6K at 85 millimeters. So this is 85 millimeters. And again, you're looking at the color and the texture in her skin, and it is just really, really accurate. I'm impressed. This just did a terrific job. This is now camera D, and this is at 85 millimeters, and camera D was the Pocket 4K. And again, if I go back and forth between these two, so this was the Pocket 6K, this was the Pocket 4K, colors are nearly identical, and I didn't even attempt to match the cameras. So had I attempted to, these would be 100%, I believe, accurate from one camera to the other. The next clip, we're back out in the park with Bert again, and this was shot on the Pocket 6K. The way that this camera is able to take the color and texture of the sky and then allow that to show through the detail of the tree and the branches, it's just not what you would expect from a camera that is under $3,000 and shooting at 6K resolution. So I don't know, it's like a no-brainer. If you're starting out, if you're into cinematography, if you want to make cinematic content for your clients, for your company, for yourself, you want to shoot a short movie or something for internet delivery, I would say it's very difficult to go wrong with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So this was now shot with camera B, and this is at 50 millimeters. So camera B was the Canon C200, And you guys know that I'm a fan of the Canon C200, right? I'm a fan of a lot of Canon cameras for a lot of reasons. Main one is that this is how I make a living. And these cameras have allowed me to build my business. On this side-by-side comparison, in my opinion, in this studio shot, the way that this was exposed, using the Canon provided LUTs to get it to Rec 709 YDR color range, the Blackmagic cameras, the Pocket 4K, the Pocket 6K, make the Canon C200 look like a video camera, not like a cinema camera. And you guys haven't heard me really say that before. But shooting this, and again, I'm using the Canon provided LUTs, I get a video looking image, which I'm not a fan of. And one of the reasons why I created my own set of LUTs, which if you guys follow my channel, you know that, I've been using those for a while, and how it is that I use them in my weekly and daily workflows. And if you guys want to check them out, there's a link in the notes below. Again, if you're going to use the Canon provided LUTs, you're going to get a nice looking image, no doubt, but for sure it's going to look very video. So there are lots of points that really impressed me about this shot. Bert is being backlit, which really means is that the front side of what it is that we're seeing, where Bert is standing and facing, is actually in shadow. She is under the tree's canopy, which is then also making her be in shadow. The tree itself, the bark that is on the right side of the camera, is in even deeper shadow than where Bert is, because there is no light reflecting on this side of the tree. The fact that I can get that much texture, and I realize it's out of focus because it should be. It's in the foreground, and my point of interest is Bert. I'm framing to Bert. But I can still get that kind of texture, that kind of color out of that bark in full shadow is really, really amazing and impressive to me. Because if I needed to rack focus from the tree to Bert, I actually could and have a great level of detail. So as a DP, I don't need multiple setups when I'm shooting with the Pocket 6K in this scenario, right? And then you couple that with the great color representation across the entire frame. Her tank top looks exactly the way that it does to me when I look at it with my eyes. Her pants, they both have texture and they are the right color. The grasses, the browns and the greens are not mixing with one another. They're very distinct. The tree line in the background, that is exactly what it looks like. And then most impressively is the fact that those clouds in the background, they're not clipping. So all of the texture and the different gradients and the different level of clouds, it's all there. So I'm able to retain that kind of highlight information as well as the dark side of the frame or the bark, right? All that level of information in one single shot. You know what that does? It makes it much easier as a DP to work and move faster with the tool that, again, is incredibly attainable and affordable. Needless to say, I'm impressed by this camera, right? So now moving on to the last shot that I showed in that video, which again is a shot of Bert on the bridge, where she goes from one side of the bridge to the other, and we rack focus from the background to actually Bert's hair and shoulders and the bridge. And again, if you look at how much information is there, especially with the different tones in Bert's hair, right? It's like nothing was lost. But if you look at the start of the frame, how much information is in the clouds, and this was basically a full Sunday because we're not in any kind of shadow. And yes, we did have some clouds, but they were not in the direction where the sun was actually facing. And there is just a ton of dynamic range that you can pull and get out of this Blackmagic Pocket 6K. This little camera, it's a beast, no doubt. Hopefully you guys enjoy this type of content. If you do, be sure to let me know. And until next time, I'm Carlos, and I'll catch you guys in the comments. Take care.